On the afternoon of June 24th, 1947, the pilot Kenneth Arnold was flying a small plane near Mount Rainier when he saw a series of bright flashes. He then saw what he would later describe as 9 unidentified flying objects that were convex in shape, similar to crescents, moving in single file at twice the speed of sound. He would describe their movement as skipping across the atmosphere, kind of like a river rock or a teacup saucer thrown on the water. One fateful misquote later, and the phenomenon of flying saucers was born. From that day forward, and despite Arnold's insistence that the objects he saw were not actually saucer-shaped, flying saucers were sighted across the globe at an astonishing rate, and Hollywood almost immediately took notice. Starting with 1950's The Flying Saucer, they became a staple of science fiction cinema, appearing in everything from The Day the Earth Stood Still to Forbidden Planet. Around the same time, the American Marine Corps naval aviator and pulp sci-fi writer Donald Keyhoe became the first well-known researcher of the phenomenon, what would nowadays be called a ufologist. Advocating full government disclosure and cooperation, Keyhoe published a book purported to be nonfiction called The Flying Saucers Are Real, followed by another book titled Flying Saucers from Outer Space. These became the inspiration for a science fiction film shortly thereafter, with a story that involved the worst-case scenario, the idea that flying saucers have come to the Earth with destructive intent. The noble ladies and gentlemen of science at Project Skyhook aim to send multiple communication satellites into the heavenly heights of Earth's orbit. All of their previous attempts have been thwarted, however, by unknown failures and disappearances. As they send up their 11th rocket, Brigadier General John Henley informs his daughter Carol and her new husband Russell Marvin, leaders of Project Skyhook, that the previous satellites have all fallen back to Earth. After the 11th satellite crashes not far away, an alien spacecraft lands just outside of the Skyhook base, setting off a war between the forces of planet Earth and the flying saucers. Before we go any further, if you could please hit that like button, we can put a stop to the destructive madness of the YouTube algorithm. If you really do like this video, hit that subscribe button too. Thank you in advance. With that out of the way, let's get back to the subject at hand. After the success of 1953's The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, the special effects Grand Master Ray Harryhausen was introduced to producer Charles Schneer, who worked for Columbia Pictures under Sam Katzman. Harryhausen and Schneer made It Came From Beneath the Sea together, which was so successful that it would be the start of a long and fruitful partnership in which Schneer would produce nearly all of Harryhausen's subsequent films. One day, Schneer read an article in the newspaper about flying saucers, and approached Harryhausen with the idea of making a film based on the idea. Harryhausen was keen, and so they conscripted the writer Kurt Siodmak to come up with a story. Siodmak was known primarily for working on several of the Universal classic monster movies, along with B-pictures like The Magnetic Monster and Creature with the Atom Brain. He and Harryhausen developed the story together and did extensive research on the subject of UFOs, including studying Donald Keyhoe's books and even interviewing eyewitnesses like George Adamski. It was then up to George Worthing Yates and Bernard Gordon to write the screenplay, while the workhorse Fred F. Sears was tasked to direct. Bernard Gordon, however, was on the Hollywood blacklist for once being a member of the Communist Party of the United States, so he and Charles Schneer had an under-the-table arrangement whereby Gordon would write under the pseudonym Raymond T. Marcus, an actual person who was Gordon's friend, but who didn't actually work in the industry. It would take 50 years for Gordon's real name to be restored in the film's credits. Ironically, a year after Earth vs. the Flying Saucers, Gordon would help write Hellcats of the Navy, a movie notable for introducing future President Ronald Reagan to future First Lady Nancy Davis. To play the lead, Dr. Russell Marvin, they brought on Hugh Marlowe, a character actor who'd been in All About Eve and The Day the Earth Stood Still. Opposite him as Dr. Marvin's new wife, Carol, is Joan Taylor, a former member of Paramount's Golden Circle. While Marlowe does a decent job as a fairly typical scientist hero,
I must get this to a lab.
Taylor does a better job as an intelligent woman who loses her father and doesn't want to lose her husband. Granted, she isn't given much to do, but Taylor elevates a thankless role to become probably the best actor in the film. Morris Ankrum plays her father, General Hanley. Ankrum was a prolific character actor who had become most well known for his work on sci-fi B pictures like Rocket Ship XM, Invaders from Mars, and Kronos. Major Hoagland is played by Donald Curtis, who had a significant role in Harryhausen and Schneer's It Came from Beneath the Sea. The only other actor worth noting is an uncredited Paul Frees, who voices the aliens.
People of Earth, attention. This is a voice speaking to you from thousands of miles beyond your planet.
Principal photography took place over 2 weeks in September of 1955, with location shooting done in Washington, D.C., at UCLA, along Malibu Beach just outside of Ray Harryhausen's own property, and at the Hyperion Treatment Plant near Redondo Beach, where the sound of sewage moving through the various pipes was used to create the saucer sound effects. Harryhausen, as a one-man special effects department, worked the entire time behind the scenes, usually making stop-motion sequences in an abandoned store that was big enough to suit his needs. Harryhausen used saucers of various sizes, with the largest being 12 inches across, that were actually created by his father out of aluminum and wood. He often put multiple sizes of saucers in the same shot in order to create a forced perspective, and warped glass was used to create the distortion fields. A lot of simple compositing and double exposure techniques created shadows and other visual effects, including the death rays, which were created with Roman candles and sparklers, no doubt inspired by the heat rays from George Pal's War of the Worlds, which were made with welding torches. In fact, this shot of what was actually LA's City Hall exploding came directly from War of the Worlds. Stock footage was also extensively used, cleverly combined with the effects and even cleaned up frame by Harryhausen to look more natural. This wasn't too big of a deal since he was already going frame by frame to carefully paint over the wires holding his spaceships and other stop-motion materials aloft. Earth vs. the Flying Saucers released in June of 1956, to decent reviews and a good box office haul of $1.25 million in rentals. As a B picture, it had a very low budget, somewhere in the $200,000 to $300,000 range, and was aimed at general audiences. As such, it was a huge success, giving Schneer the boost he needed to get out from under Sam Katzman and create his own production company, Morningside Productions. Despite being a B picture, in the long run, Earth vs. the Flying Saucers has proven far more influential than most A pictures of the same time period. After destroying Golden Gate Bridge and It Came from Beneath the Sea, Harryhausen quickly learned the impact he could have by destroying iconic landmarks, something he did multiple times with Earth vs. the Flying Saucers, and which has become a major trope of science fiction, most notably in Independence Day, a movie to which Earth vs. the Flying Saucers shares more than just a passing resemblance. It also heavily influenced Tim Burton's Mars Attacks, which spoofs/homages a few of its scenes, and aspects of it can be seen in practically any alien invasion movie made after 1956. However, I'm not gonna lie to you and tell you it's anything but a very schlocky movie that says things like solidified electricity with a straight face.
What's it made of?
We don't know exactly. Solidified electricity is the fancy name given to it by the Bureau of Standards.
The effects are fun and were no doubt impressive in their day, but it's hard to look at things like these alien costumes and not at least chuckle at the kitschiness of it all. This is a stereotypically silly 50s sci-fi romp that really shouldn't be taken seriously, despite the influence that it has had. Everything that made it unique in 1956 has been repeated so many times that it now feels like a jumble of cliches and ludicrous plot beats rather than a coherent movie of its own. Still, it's an undeniable classic that is entertaining as long as you know what you're getting into. Harryhausen might have considered it his least favorite of the films he worked on, but even he still loved it enough to fully embrace its legacy a few years back when the movie was colorized. Sure, it's cheesy, tacky, silly, and adolescent. Sure, the science is laughably bad. Sure, the costumes look ridiculous, but come on, how can you not love a movie self-aware enough to call itself Earth versus the Flying Saucers? And that's all for today, my fellow Earthlings. What's your favorite flying saucer movie? Let me know in the comments, and while you're there, don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you'd like to support what I do even more, consider joining my Patreon to get early access, bonus content, and more. My patrons vote on one movie I cover every single month. You can also check out my website at emcgill.com, where you'll find written reviews of plenty more sci-fi classics in both film and literature. Until next time, though, when I'll finally get around to covering the black sheep of a certain sci-fi series, this is the Unapologetic Geek, telling you to never be ashamed of what you love. As long as you're not hurting anybody.
Say something into the microphone.
The quality of mercy is not strained.